Good morning, everyone. Happy Black History Month. Today, we are going to do our community spotlight on Mrs. Barbara Wright. She is our family consumer science teacher at Smyrna Middle School. She has been a teacher with us for 48 years and has lots of history to share. So, Mrs. Wright, could you tell us who you are and what you do in our school district?
Yes, I can. As I tell everyone, the students especially, I am the Mrs. Wright, one of the family consumer science teacher at Smyrna Middle School. Some might know it as home economics. That is the old name that we went through. Several years ago, it was changed to family consumer science, which we simply call FCS, simply because of the enrollment for these classes were decreasing at the high school and they were losing teachers. So they did a name change, and this is across the nation. And the state of Delaware went with family consumer science instead of human resources. So that's why it's now called family consumer science. And yes, this is my 48th year in the Smyrna School District. I started in August of 1973. And before beginning my teaching career at Smyrna School District, I did a semester at Season Rodney High School for a teacher, I think Mrs. Bowden, who was going on maternity leave for that semester. So I started there, and then I became a extension agent for Delaware State University's extension program for the second half of that year. And I really was interested in teaching, and I finally had an opening at Smyrna High School, and this is where I've been ever since. I started at the high school, many remember from the high school, and I'd say late 70s, I was transferred to Smyrna Middle School, and been here ever since. Big change going from high school to middle school. This is where, when I'm finally ready to retire, I was changing my mind that when I was in my teaching career in Smyrna School District.
Thank you. Did you grow up in the Smyrna community? And if so, what was that like?
Yes, I did. I say I am 100% Delawarean. I was born in Wilmington, Delaware. Back then, I guess everyone went to, it was called Wilmington General Hospital, but we lived in Smyrna, and so I was all my life until I got married and moved to Dover for about 10 years. I've been in the Smyrna, Clayton area. My adolescent years, well, before that, I moved back to Smyrna, really living in Clayton in 1984 after living in Dover for 10 years. My adolescent years was during the 60s, the time of change, time of civil unrest, but different before the 60s, or during the 60s, Smyrna had a black side and a white side. So we never connected like we are now. So the black stayed on their side, the white stayed on our side. They always used a phrase like, if you want to find the black family community, go to the railroad track. Across the railroad track, you'll find them. And so we attended our own churches. There was like 4 black churches at the time in the area that we attended. And I was active in the church. I started my religious upbringing at Bethlehem Church, and then my mother later transferred to St. Tanya, where I'm presently at now. But there was no connections until integration took place. I attended the all-black elementary school, Thomas D. Clayton, which is still in the Smyrna School District, and still has the same name. And that school was from the 1st grade to the 6th grade. And at the end of the 6th grade, we couldn't attend Smyrna High School. We had to go to William Henry High School in in Dover. That was a black high school. There was 3 in each county: Howard High, in Wilmington, I think Jason High School, in Georgetown. So the one in the Kent County area went to William Henry. However, at the completion of the 6th grade, the district did a total integration, because I can remember my younger brother and sister, they started at Smyrna Elementary, and they were doing like 1 grade at a time. But by the 60s, there was total integration, and there was a meeting called at Thomas D. Clayton. Mr. Powell was the principal, and when they integrated, I think he was the principal for maybe more than 1 or 2 years, but he was the principal in the district a short term before he retired from here. And he talked to the parents, and he told them for that travel, because that was like 12 to 15 miles for us to go every day by bus. It'd be better if we go to Smyrna High School. The change is coming. He said, I think will work out very well. And so, but we had a choice. So we still could go to William Henry High School. So that was a dividing point for many of the black students around my age that time. And so some went to Smyrna High School. Some continue on to William Henry, but William Henry closed in 1966. So those who went to William Henry end up at Smyrna High School their last 2 years. And so I've been in the school district, you could say, from Thomas D. Clayton, graduated from Smyrna High School in 1967, and eventually came back and doing my teaching career in the Smyrna School District. How did the DSA go in Smyrna? I think it went quite smoothly. There was fear, uncertainty. We were scared. I'm pretty sure they were scared. We have been prepped very well through our churches, through the teachers. A few of them got on at the school district here. The others went up the road to school district in Newcastle, and 2 others went to the Capital School District, but they all found jobs, because that eliminated their job position too. And so it wasn't like, I say, Milford. But I think back to it, I think Milford even made the paper. They were the worst one. I think they had police there one time, but we were scared that first day and for a while. But we didn't have any of the problems I would say Milford High School had at the time. The teachers accepted us. I'm sure they were prepped too. I can remember distinctly having Mr. Joseph, that's our school nurse, Mrs. Willoughby, her father, as a teacher, Mrs. Mendenhall. We already knew Mrs. Sparks, the school nurse, and Mr. Tripp, and he's still living. I think he turned 100 last August. We already knew them because they were the only 2 white teachers that came over to the black school, and for 1 week, each week they would come. So we were familiar with them too, and we had to become acquainted with the rest. Mr. Williams was the principal. Mr. Parcell was the junior high principal, because back then they didn't call it middle school; they called it junior high. And so Smyrna High went from 7th to 12th at that time. So Mr. Parcell was my junior high principal, and then when I went to the 9th grade, Mr. Williams was my principal. And before we left Thomas D. Clayton, we were being trained to play in the band at William Henry. C.P. Houston, who later become, a judge, magistrate judge, was training us. He was the band director at William Henry High School. So he talked to Mr. Daniels. So he finished training us on our instrument and put us right into the band when we became high school students.
Wow.
With no problem.
That's amazing. What are some of your accomplishments throughout your lifetime?
I just name a few. I guess Smyrna Middle School Teacher of the Year, 2004, 2005 is Major accomplishment for me. Totally surprised that day. I recognized in my church, we're out now and can't have the programs during the Black History Month, but the youth committee did a recognizing Black heroes in the community. And one year I was selected as one of the heroes for their program. Uh, my work with the usher ministry, that goes back to see in the church there. But my biggest one that I take proud of is participating in the civil rights March on Washington, August the 23rd, 28th, I had that wrong, 28th, 1965. That year is correct, 1965. That was the biggest accomplishment, something I will never forget. And I still have the pen. It was only 50 cents. Mr. Howard Hill, Bethel ME Church, there was 3 of us sent by the church, bought us the pen, told us to hold on to it because it is worth something down the road, and we will always remember it. And surprising, it still has the color. You can still see every word, every letter in this pen. And to walk down there to the Washington Monument was amazing because there was the signs that no dough for Jim Crow and go home niggers. And so I was kind of scared because I was only 13 at the time. But we marched and we went and we came back and I lived to tell it. So that is probably my proudest accomplishment so far.
Wow. Mrs. Wright, what was it like to go to the march in 1963?
Not sure what we were expecting or how it was going to be. It was the 3 of us. It was all 13. We left from Bethel ME Church, but Mr. Hill and Mr. Raleigh, well-known black barber in Smyrna at the time, and they were with the NAACP, and we met at Mount Zion, boarded the school bus there, and that took us to D.C. Cannot recall the name of the black church where we're meeting at, but there we met and they had refreshments, juice, coffee, donuts for us, and then eventually we got in line. Delaware was somewhere around there. Participants from New Jersey and Maryland, and we walked the distance. That's where we saw those signs: no dough for Jim Crow, go home. They were all down on the side there, and there was, of course, people making money. That's how I got my little badge here for Mr. Hill, only 50 cents. Mr. Hill told us to keep it, and you see I have kept it all this time. And if I correct my date on that, it was August 28th, 1963. And we walked down to the Washington Monument. We sat on the grass and we listened to the speakers singing. While we could not see them, because we were back far away, we could hear very clearly their message that they were presenting to us. And somewhere I will say, I think it was around 6 or 7 things ended. We boarded the bus back home. We got back to Dover around 9 o'clock that evening.
Wow. Mrs. Wright, do you want to add one more accomplishment?
Yes, I definitely wanted to add that I was chosen, or first I was asked, try to turn them down, but they kept pushing me to be a guest speaker at our annual Smyrna Middle School under direction of Mr. Gott, to be a guest speaker for our Black History program. I forgot the year though.
What is some advice that you could give to our students today?
I tell my students every semester, every year, every class, treat everyone with respect, treat everyone with kindness, show compassion. I always tell them that life, this is a quote I saw it on Facebook and I take with me, and I have a poster with, don't have it up there due to let's blame it on the COVID pandemic. I didn't get all my posters up, but I had this poster, and I stated a lot of the times, life is like a camera. Focus on what's important, capture the good times, develop from the negative, and things don't turn out, take another shot, which means hold on to the good things, hold on to the important things, and when you stumble and fall, you learn from your mistakes, pick yourself up, and keep on moving. Because a winner never quits and a quitter never wins, is my quote.
That's some good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I think you answered this one already, but is there any story from your history or the community that you would like to share? I think you talked about that with the march.
Yeah, I can just add in the community. Okay. The blacks was like living on one side of town. That was like DuPont Highway, we call it at the time. And then the other blacks, we say the other side of town. That would be the section, I would say, down from Smyrna Elementary. And in the summers, we all would get together. We'd play our ball games. And in winter times, when school was closed, because those were heavy snowstorms at that time, we would go out and have our snowball fights and sleigh riding. We were active, very active in the church. We seemed like all knew one another. Parents knew one another. They watch out for their children and the whole neighborhood children. And Halloween, I could say Halloween, they always tell us stay in your own area, stay in your neighborhood, because you don't need to go to the neighborhoods that don't want you, won't treat you right. So we had to learn the hard way. Okay, well, someone said, well, they got the best candy, so we went into the white neighborhood. But many times we got the doors slammed on us, the N-word, and get out of here. And so we understood, especially during Halloween times, what they meant by stay in your own neighborhood. Okay. And probably the worst one for integration, and I don't forget it, was walking to school round by which was the library, because we went to, which is now JBM, intermediate school, and a bus was coming by, and this white boy leaned his head out and spit, and it landed on my arm, and it rolled all the way down. Of course, the bus takes off. I don't know who he was. That is my worst memory of going to integrated Smyrna High at that time. But outside that, we seemed to all to get along. We still couldn't go to all that outside activities. I can remember it was called the Century Club. It was next to the movies, and we went to the schools and we thought we could get in, but one of the librarian, he stopped us. He said it wasn't for us, and so we all had to. We didn't get past the door, and that's when we found out there's still a difference between going to school with them and not going to school with the movies. For a long while, we were upstairs, and they was downstairs. We've always had to go upstairs, a little small area upstairs, the movies.
When did it start to change?
I would say in the would be the late 60s. I can remember going into stores and being followed. Some restaurants we couldn't go in, and if we want to buy food, we'd go around the back door. That was in Smyrna, yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, what does Black History Month mean to you?
I say it's a time to relive, to don't forget our culture, or all of our accomplishments, and at the same time, we look to the future. Yes, things are better than they were in the past for many of us. Some are trying to turn us back, but we got to focus on the future and don't let what happened in the past come back and make that a new way of life or back to the same old thing. I don't think we should ever go back. And I say to the young ones, never forget your roots. We made a struggle to make it better, and then it's going to be your job to make it even better for your next generation. So we always look ahead, look to the future. And I'm glad to see us celebrate Black History Month. I'm glad to see many other school districts doing it. I can remember Tom, and his name was Mr. Raleigh. When February came, he always took a week out and it was strictly Black History. Okay. When we went to Thomas D. Clayton, it was only a week then. We just focused on Black History from that Monday to that Friday. But now that they extended we have a whole month now to enjoy our culture, to recognize and let us know we are here, this we're about, and look where we come from, and look where we're going to.
Yes. Well, Mrs. Wright, you have anything you want to say at the end?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Closing remarks?
Closing remarks. I'm a lifelong learner. I tell students you never stop learning. You always will be a lifelong learner. I believe in education is the key to success. It opens doors for everyone. It opens doors for everyone, for all students to achieve their accomplishments for their lifetime goals.
Well, you are certainly one of our heroes of Smyrna. We are very proud to have you here. We love you. And that will conclude our community spotlight of Mrs. Barbara Wright.